set up their tent,
I'm pausing
got
it
their
for
inventory.
Renata, so I'm just gonna,
Sure.
okay, yeah.
Sounds good. So
Yeah.
I don't know, those who have spoken in the past, do you have any insight when they usually let folks know if they were chosen?
I don't remember last year. It was kind of a blur, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
for
everything
me.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was like 6 weeks or something
Okay.
like that. I feel like it was the end of July.
Okay.
And then we recorded, I want to say at the end of August. It was
Okay.
like really early. And so I was like trying to get my presentation
Yeah.
fixed. But this year I have to skip because I have 2 weddings to go to.
Oh, that's a good reason.
Yeah, it was like everybody that couldn't get married last year is getting married now. So
Yeah,
I have
precisely.
I have a lot of traveling I'm going to be doing. So
Yeah. So what was the experience like speaking virtually last year? Like how much rigmarole was there to record? And I know that you spoke with someone, Shelley. So what was that like? No, you
no,
didn't.
no, it was a recorded session and a live Q&A after.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but last year, it was either virtual 100% or people who were actually featured, like me, I
Mhm.
couldn't even believe it,
Mhm.
had to do the whole live stream part. And while the live stream was going on, our mics were hot. We had to stay quiet and not say a thing and
Oh,
watch our
wow.
own sessions. And I hate that. I
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
watching myself. It's really hard. And I'm just like, I sound depressed. What's wrong with my voice? And then I figured it's 2020. So I think
Yeah.
people will. Yeah. The recording part last year, I recorded the screen ahead of time. And then I had to sit on a call with like 3 producers and record the audio.
Oh, wow.
And I was 3/4 of the way done. And the guy was like, I'm so sorry. I'm not recording your audio. And I was like,
Oh man.
it was awful.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like
that is
sweating.
bad.
You know, and I knew that there was some very, I don't know, sophisticated technological AV magic going on behind the scenes, but I don't think any of us, I mean, I didn't grasp what it took to pull that off virtually last year. And, you know, I mean, aside from getting together with our Sitecore buddies and stuff, I mean, I learned a lot. I thought it was great. And I kind of liked, you know, being in my living room, watching these things, taking notes furiously. And
Yeah.
yeah, I still got a lot out of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could ever present in person. That would be like really nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
especially if I'm like coding live. I think instead of actually coding live, I would have a completed solution and then walk the people through it because
Right. Yeah.
I've seen people melt down trying
Oh,
to
yeah, for
do
sure.
something live. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Has anyone else on the call presented before? Have any words of wisdom for those of us crossing our fingers?
To do the presentation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever presented at symposium?
Yeah, I had a featured slot last year, and luckily they hit the record button. Poor Shelley. So maybe they got the practice before they got to me. But
Yeah.
but we didn't have too many issues. I mean,
That's good.
the production company was pretty well on top of it, telling us what had to happen, and I was just going along for the ride. They did send us like a lot of emails of like, do this, do that, and I'm like skimming through it, and I'm like, you know what? They can just tell me in real time what I need to do, because I felt like I was studying for like a whole new exam. Like how you present online and watch yourself before the Q&A comes up. So it was pretty interesting, but logistically it was very easy because I could sit in my office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I presented twice, and one thing that I remember was we really need to pay attention to our audience. I had some folks in my presentation that were just waiting to hear about PowerShell, and I was never mentioning it as part of my presentation. I should, because it's their preferred tool for everything there, and I guess it's really about knowing your audience and getting in touch with them, and whenever possible, getting them involved as well.
Yeah, excellent, excellent tip. The other thing is keep yourself, you're open, the audience, you're inviting them in. Don't like not look at the camera and,
Yeah.
it's like warmth, I think, makes people more interested because we're talking about topics, I'm sorry, but they're boring and dry. You have to make them interesting in some way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and Shelley, I really liked yours last year. I remember you talking about, the value of research and developing empathy. And I was in this chair going, yes, someone finally gets it. They understand us,
Yeah,
So-
totally. It's a team effort. It
Mhm.
isn't us versus them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, whenever I'm trying to do any presentations, is most of the people that were listening to you are rooting for you to do well.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like you're not, well, unless they're, butt heads. And
Yeah.
in which case, screw them. Nobody wants you to fail. So, I mean, like I think that you have to always remember that you're typically in front of a non-hostile audience for the most part. So start out with understanding that. Like Shelley here, we all love Shelley. I mean, who doesn't love
I
Shelley?
know.
I
Right.
love you guys too. I love
it's just like,
our
oh,
group.
right.
Well, that's a good segue into kind of handing the mic to Shelley. I think most of us know you, but it might be worth just doing another 10-second intro, and I'm going to turn off my video so we can give you our full attention. So Shelley, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Shelley. I am a Sitecore technology MVP. I'm sorry, a two-time Sitecore technology MVP. I am an author at Pluralsight and other things, I think soon. I live in Florida. I really like Disney, like a whole lot. I'm actually surprised I don't have that much. Well, no, I have Lumiere there and Mickey. Yeah, so that's me. And today we're going to talk about communication between teams, which is a very important topic that is close to my heart. I'm going to share my screen. So in our last meeting, we left off at task management. Let me get my stuff up here. So the first thing that we talked about was providing requirements in full and in writing. Communication spans multiple, formats, either meetings, which I don't like, or written stuff is so important because in meetings, I'm sorry, but people, zone out sometimes and aren't exactly listening 100%. I'm not saying I've ever done that, but yeah. So just make sure that you're not skimping on anything. Even the smallest detail should help to ensure that everybody's on the same page and that you will be able to produce the feature or page or whatever based on requirements. And I think another thing that helps here is active listening because strategy and dev are often speaking two different languages. So that doesn't mean that we can't like understand each other, but through repeating what you understand someone else said. It's like telephone, right? Where, you know, you start off with the correct message, and by the time it trickles down the line, it's something completely wrong and completely different. So I ask a lot of questions. I make sure that I understand everything from a strategy point. So the next thing is don't make assumptions. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me. You know, this happens a lot. And it's just that, you know, we're so busy. We're in meetings and, you know, working on multiple projects at the same time. Sometimes you assume things just because of timing, right? It happens to everybody. And I'm not saying that you should do all of these things 100%. You never will. It's just tips to aid uh, communication overall. I am terrible at assumptions. I do this a lot, which is why I've written it down and I have like a note on my wall that's just like, don't do this. You know what you're doing. Um, yeah, so assumptions are bad. So testing, fully test all the requirements. I feel like I've had jobs where strategy people tested strategy tickets, and that went really well because someone who's QA only would probably not have that level of expertise to ensure that, you know, it's using the profile pattern cards or like testing pages and content. So for strategy, I really look to you guys to test numbers, especially, and reports. You know, if I'm writing a custom report, it's very important to not assume anything first, but then also have it tested completely, because you don't want to roll out something where the client is just, you know, drooling for this information and it's important. Yeah. And so, oh, story time about this. I had a job once a long time ago, and they didn't give me any requirements for a main feature of their site. They decided without asking me or any of the other devs that the site would be rebranded and launched in full within 6 months. So that gives you an idea of what I was working with. But I kept asking for requirements. And so I ended up writing the requirements myself, which is not a good idea. You don't want the developer to write the like business cases, right? So someone Dennis, that's awesome. Yeah. Someone who was supposed to test it told me he did and that it worked and that it was fine. And then when I had to present it to like the directors and stuff like that, they were all like, this is terrible. This is horrible. One of them actually said, off with her head. And I was like, okay, then I was put in a position to fail. And so I did, because didn't have any requirements. And furthermore, it wasn't tested. And this was 2 weeks before launch. And for some reason I stayed and I failed and I got fired. But I'm loyal to a fault. So I tried. But yeah,
Seems a little dramatic on their part in your
right?
defense. but
Yeah.
okay.
But like at the time, I was crushed. I thought it was my fault. And it wasn't until someone heard the story and was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You were totally not at fault for that. I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah. And I'm sure none of you would ever do this. It's just kind of an entertaining story that I have from my time in the trenches as a lead dev. On the other hand, okay, I have a good story where I had one strategy consultant who I worked really, really close with. And she took it upon herself to test all of the strategy features and explain to me what was going on and why. And so I was always successful with her. You know, I was set up for success. So, all right. So the next topic, this one I love, radical empathy. So this is where, you know, even if personally you don't like a person, they're, you know, rude, callous, whatever, it might be because they're going through some stuff. And I'm not excusing like jerks, but even when you're like complete enemies with somebody, which, you know, I don't generally do that, but um, if you understand where they're coming from, it really, really helps to smooth out the relationship and really helps you to communicate more effectively. Um, Especially because this past year and a half almost has been awful. I think everybody knows this. COVID has impacted every single person in the entire world. People have lost relatives and friends, and understanding that, you know, consistency is probably not going to be a thing for a while will really help. And I feel like when companies ignore it and just act like everything's normal, everything's fine, and employees are struggling and they're still ignoring it, that's very, very toxic to e- just everybody. So I think that talking through some stuff, of course, it's personal. So there's a line that you can't cross. Um, but we work together for, you know, hours and hours every day. So you have to find a way to promote teamwork. Uh, yeah, the comfort zone. So some people want to stay in their comfort zone. I am not one of those people. And I get very frustrated when I see the potential in people who just, you know, aren't interested in observing it in themselves or trying new things. And so when I meet people like that, I try to understand why, because not everybody wants to, you know, be a Sitecore MVP. Not everybody wants to present at symposium or present ever to anyone, and that's okay. Um, I've seen people on both sides be thrown into something that they did not want to do because management never asked if they wanted to do that, even though it wasn't anything that they've previously done. It wasn't in their job description at all. So yeah, just it's a good practice to, encourage people, but if they resist, that's fine. Um, don't push it. I've had interactions with devs who were just like did not want to present to clients ever, and then they were like lead developers, right? And they were just like, I don't want to do this. It's too much, which, is understandable. Loads of people are introverted and just are happy, you know, just working, right?
Hey, Shelley, this is Megan. So to that point, like, to what extent is that an expectation though, part of the job?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a strategist, so yeah, a lot of my work is client facing, but I can't imagine a day when I say, oh, I really don't want to present to the client. Like that's part of the
Yeah,
job, part of the gig.
exactly. So people who are promoted into a client facing role um, should either say like, I don't really think that I fit this role, or if they try it and they're just like not, you know, good at it or comfortable at all, I don't think they should really be fired for that. Rather change roles instead, if that's available.
And I also think, I mean, regardless if you're a developer or just, any kind of consultant, that's something that can be coached. I mean, a lot of people never learn how to do that. They're
Yeah,
not in speech. They don't do that stuff in high school or college.
right.
And, if you've never learned the tips, gotten comfortable doing it, yeah, it can be terrifying when all of a sudden you're 35 and have to do that out of the blue.
Right.
So I would hope most organizations, give folks the opportunity to train, be coached on that,
Exactly.
if it's something they do want to learn how to do better to grow their career.
Right. And yeah, coaching, mentoring especially is, something that I do most of the time now. So I am just so passionate about leading people through job growth. And I've had a lot of people who were just resistant to speaking actually, but there are plenty of other things. Like I'm resistant to writing the entire back end for a website. That's just like, that's a lot for me. Yeah, it's um important for people to understand workload as well, because for a lot of people, I think most of us, our workload is too much. It's just a lot. So sometimes we get stressed out and annoyed and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's not really relating to this point, but the previous one. Use encouraging and comforting words. This is especially important when people are clearly having a day. Like they're just, everything's raining. I once had a 14-hour deploy that I could have passed, from team member to team member in each time zone, but for some reason I did not do that, and I did the whole thing, and I was like, that was a lot. But learn to recognize struggle in people. It can be either lots of PTO, unplanned, or just a very low energy. monotone speaking is often an example of a person who's just going through the motions, right? And isn't really engaged anymore at work. For example, if a coworker is struggling and overwhelmed and is working overtime like a lot, you can offer encouragement and check in to make them feel like they aren't alone. I've had people who really were patient with me. I'm not always pleasant, you know. I'm I'm like, it's got to be by the book, you know. This is textbook. Why aren't you doing it this way? Um, but I've worked with some amazing people who would like talk me down, you know, like I like to take negative statements and turn them positive. Like when I was doing that 14-hour deploy, um, I could have either thought, this is hell and I'm never doing this again. But I chose to feel like I was responsible. I was a responsible adult that had this together and that could take care of all of this, even though people had published to web when the deploy wasn't finished, you know, and then also to not blame one person. Everything is a team effort. And it really shows, oh, you know, a great example of this was the HBO email, right? Where the intern sent out a integration test to, you know, hundreds of millions of people probably. And then HBO put out a statement blaming an intern. And a lot of us were just like, no, that is not appropriate. You can't, especially on Twitter. Like, why would you put out a statement like that? It's a team effort. That person had a supervisor or manager who is just as much at fault. Um, when I manage teams, I would always take all of the blame for everything, and then I wouldn't take any of the accolades for positive things. And I think as a leader, that's just kind of something that you do. But yeah, when you encourage people who are clearly down, you could impact their entire life. Honestly, I've had people say one thing to me one time when I was just at a low point, and it stays, and I write it down and I look at it, and whenever I feel like humanity has gone crazy or whatever, I look at the positive, you know, messages I've heard overall. That's also a mental health tip. It's a good thing to do.
Shelley, when, you know, I can feel when our developers are overwhelmed and overworked.
Good.
And even though there's rarely anything I can do for them,
Right.
I always ask, is there anything small or putsy or easy that I can take off your plate? Is there like a piece of paperwork that's driving you crazy because you can't get to it? And even though I know there's very little I can do for them, they've told me often that just offering helps, acknowledging that they just have too much right now, regardless of the role. It just helps to tell someone that if I could, I would, you know. And sometimes there is something small and somewhat menial and easy that you can just take care of for them. And it's sometimes the biggest load off their mind to not worry about it anymore.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you so much for doing that. That's amazing. And on the other side, I've worked with strategists who were overwhelmed, who had like 5 client meetings that day or something. And at times I would sit in case I was needed. So it's just helps to understand other people. And I think that as humans, and it's just hard to communicate at times. Either you're afraid to be fired, that was always my thing. I've had 22 jobs. So, or you aren't sure of how your message would be received. But I can tell you that warmth is a message that is always received well. Yeah. What do I have next? Communication planning. So this is more leadership stuff, but I feel like people who aren't in managerial positions can still help to formulate how and why each message is put into a, excuse me, specific channel. So your channels would be like email, texting, Slack, Teams, all of that stuff. The ask that I have for every employee, no matter what, is don't text people while they're on vacation. Every job I've ever had has texted me while I was on vacation, and it really took me out of the relaxation mode that I was trying to achieve, to return to work rested and relaxed and be better at my job. So,
Shelley, I hate to like keep interjecting
no,
myself
no,
because
it's
that's
great.
it's rude. But coming off the holiday weekend, the same thing goes for holidays. I had so many people emailing and IMing yesterday, and I understand that people, fine, if you want to work on your holiday day, that's fine, but don't ever make your team feel guilty that they're not. You know,
Exactly.
just don't expect them to respond. Don't insinuate that, you have more to do, less time, that sort of thing. Just let people have the day off.
Yeah. And I want to say on top of that, if you email, well, first of all, if that person is off, I think email is the only channel that's appropriate. Don't Slack a person or message them, because that is more of a conversation that is, to me, expected to be answered in a timely manner, whereas emails are more like, let your inbox fill up, it's fine, you know. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat. Okay, yeah. Turn notifications off, leave badges on. You can decide if you want to open the app or not. Walt is very wise. Um, when I am away, sometimes I have uninstalled Slack. Like, why do I have this on my phone? It's just whatever. Um, but texts will always go through to me. So it's a problem, but you know, it it's a smaller problem than the other the other issues that we've talked about so much. Your communication plan should also really explain where and how to send messages to external clients as well. A lot of times, almost every place I've ever worked did not let developers message the clients. And I mean, I can understand why, because if that happens, the client will just bombard the developer with questions. But at the same time, you need to have a relationship with your clients and trust. So that's a tricky one. It's a balance, I think. Excuse me a sec. I've got allergies right now because Florida in July. Um, the next part of this is the timing of your responses. Like I said, for Slack and Teams and stuff like that, I feel like that is more aiming towards like almost immediate response. But my rule was always an hour. I would not let anyone hang on for more than an hour if it was important. I mean, if it's urgent, I'll reply immediately. So there's that. Um, so for communication in general, I have this comparison to Basecamp, which was a lot more relevant last month. This month we have all new problems, but when you're communicating with teams and empathizing with people, a lot of times it surfaces conversations about topics that have a stigma, mental health, and politics and diversity. I've worked at a lot of places where you were not allowed to talk about any of those things, and if you did, management would contact everybody that you were talking to and you to tell you not to talk about it. That's not the appropriate response. So it's a response that was probably acceptable 10, 20 years ago. But now, I mean, times have changed. So when you're communicating with people, that change will change what you talk about and how comfortable you are opening up to um, peers, right? And it's just that change is inevitable. It'll happen. And when you see society, changing, then your communication plan and the topics are going to change too. Your employees will see to that, or peers. So this messaging is for leadership. It starts at the top and it works down, but sometimes it'll start at the bottom or the middle, and people will tell leadership, we need to do these things. Let's talk about why you don't want to, and have like a understanding overall, because I can understand why it's just not talked about. It's uncomfortable, and people tend to want to ignore or shut out uncomfortable things. Like I stutter a little bit, and um, whenever it happens, people get very uncomfortable. So I am accustomed to seeing, the facial expressions, the body language and stuff like that, and it makes me feel rushed because I'm making people uncomfortable and I don't I don't want to, right? So understanding and accepting uncomfortableness, uncomfortable feelings, whatever, is a huge part of radical empathy. Um, boo, boo, boo. Just looking at my. Oh, I've also experienced um, a lot of leadership teams who say, you know, have these conversations. It's open and all of that, but then their actions don't support that. So that's an issue. I'm not exactly sure how to handle that because it's leadership and you have to respect that. But as a team, as a strategist or a dev, just recognize those signs, I think, and do do what you think is right, um, most of the time without getting fired. Yeah. Okay, so that was the end of my planned stuff. Just real quick, Pluralsight. I have stuff there. I have a course that is 3/4 complete on Docker, which will be out in August. It includes everything from Docker, like basics, to custom containers and deployments using Kubernetes and AKS. So that should help people. I also teach management, which I said earlier. That screenshot of the communication plan is actually from this course on fostering effective team collaboration and communication. That spreadsheet I showed is actually in that course for you. You can have this if you want. But yeah, that's my spiel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back 2 months in a row. That was a treat, and I think really worth the double feature with Shelley. Does anybody have stuff related to this or anything else you want to bring up, talk about, things that have worked for you, frustrations? I think in the last year with everyone becoming remote, I know a lot of people have always worked remote, so it hasn't been a big change, but it feels like a lot of the ways we communicate within teams, within organizations, and then with clients has just been upended. And it's kind of like we need to establish a new set of norms and rules and expectations and just the ways we do business. I was just thinking this morning how much I miss, sorry, I just swallowed wrong. How much I miss meeting with clients in person and just the banter before and after the business gets done, where you talk about weekends and kids, and that's very often when you really find out what they think about how the project's going, So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or input or ideas around that as well. I'd be open to anything.
Yeah, so last year when everything, went to hell in a handbasket within like a week, I noticed that so many people were really quiet. So at the starting of every meeting with anybody, even clients, I would just ask, how is everybody really? Are you all good? And it was amazing. I had this one client, we were really, really close, and he just opened up to me and told me all this stuff. And I mean,
Wow.
to the group, and everything.
Yeah.
It was beautiful actually. And we all started agreeing like, oh my God, thank God someone said it. Like we're all just, we don't know what's going on. Yeah. It was actually Hopkins that was my client last year. So of course I checked everybody's mental health. The content team worked 24/7 to, you know, ensure that the COVID information was, you know, updated like every day and accurate. And so I just realized that we were in a bad situation, that team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, on the empathy front, I mean, I'm doing double duty. I've started out in development and then strategy, and now I'm doing both sometimes. So I end up seeing you know, well, recently, I mean, I think there's also been a number of things that I'm starting to get a better appreciation of in terms of perhaps what developers' jobs are, what strategists' jobs are, and what they'll see as each of us will see as being part of our jobs. And maybe sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect, not just between strategists, but clients and everything else. And I think that oftentimes things get put on developers, and I'm just kind of begging the question, I guess, but things get put on developers that maybe aren't really part of their jobs. Shelley, what have you seen or been kind of what would you say, like, is not part of a developer's job that often kind of comes across on a ticket, perhaps, and I think that's probably might cause part of that, frustration on their side. Any things that you would say there?
Yeah, I think the main thing was really expecting developers to explain why something for strategy works. For devs, we know how it works. There are often times that we'll build something that, you know, we don't really know like the end goal. Yeah. So or I've actually had jobs where I was also the strategist because there were no strategists, which is dumb. You need strategists. Yeah. Um, the main thing that helps, which I can't believe I didn't say this earlier, was to have not only requirements for the front end user, right? But to also have requirements for the Sitecore user.
Mhm.
There are different ways to do a lot of things in Sitecore. We need to know what the client's skills are. Are they, or what roles? Is it just content? Is it content people who know hardcore like HTML and CSS and stuff like that? Do we have to turn on features in rich text to, you know, match skill sets?
Mhm.
And that's where strategy understands that more, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, in my career, I think I've seen, if there's been a strategist from like, a dedicated kind of Sitecore partner who understands like the whole strategy aspect and stuff, sometimes you'll get some requirements in that in stories, but I've seen a lot, and I want to put it out there to everybody. How often have we actually like seen good strategy sort of requirements, especially on like a brand new build or migration or something, come across? And I think I've seen it a little bit too little in the stories themselves. Seems to be an endemic problem that I've seen. What do you guys think?
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I was just discussing that with someone this morning, and the scenario I painted is everyone's so busy at the outset of the project and during the project trying to convert the pictures, into the site and all the stuff you do for the development operations. Nobody stops to ask like, what are we measuring? Do we have a KPI that we can back into? That often gets forgotten. They were complaining about their analytics setup that was done a couple of years ago. I said, well, when did you start asking questions about analytics? Did you do it up front or did you wait until the end of the project? They waited until after the fact. So they didn't get the output that they wanted.
Exactly. Yeah, I've experienced that too so many times.
And I think a lot of times, like, especially if you have like an older Sitecore instance or something that somebody's had it for a while, and a few years later they're not using the features and stuff, and well, it wasn't in the initial build, so it's not that the developers didn't do it right. It wasn't even part of the thing to begin with. So how can we expect the outcome to be any different than it is when it's not in the requirements? So I think those requirement aspect is so important for sure.
Yeah. And they should see it in the sprint review. If you're on sprint 3 or 4 or something, and you do a couple actions and someone isn't going to analytics to show where that stuff is lighting up, then you've skipped a step. It should be on a checklist somewhere.
Checklists, thank you. I was trying to think of like some really good things. Checklists for sprints or implementations, like for the first live site. I've worked with one Sitecore partner that did this, and we followed it religiously. And even then, I mean, hiccups happen. Like I said, nobody follows everything that I've said here like 100%. We're humans, we're not robots. So
I think we're almost time. Thank Megan for hosting and Shelley for the second time. I remember last time, Shelley, you got promoted, well, from princess to empress, and so to send you off on from this time. Thank you so much. And we got a little wait.
I don't want to settle for
Nice.
Empress.
I need the best, not the
love it.
one.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Have a good day.
I
Take care.
don't want to
Yeah,
settle
you. Bye.
cause I'm an empress. Got too big up my chest, even if it hurts.
Nice tune there, Jimmy.
When
I
a
like it.
woman
Later, brother.
knows her worth.
See you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
So I started seeing Jamie. He acted like a baby, always playing video games.